there, gals and guys, it's me, Design Gal. User research is extremely important. This gives us all kinds of information that we take going forward in our design work. We need to understand what things have been like, where people are coming from, all the different facets that go into a particular design problem so that when we solve that problem, we know what we're dealing with, we know the pain points, and it really is the foundation for everything going forward. However, if you've never done in-depth user research, it can be kind of hard to know, how do I start? I mean, isn't Googling around good enough? That is a start. Googling is a start. The internet can give you knowledge of some research that's been done before, and you can read all kinds of stuff, and it's helpful, but there's something about hearing it directly from a potential user that helps it sink in and helps you really have empathy for the people you're designing for. That's why it's so important to include this stuff in your process, and I hope this video helps you know a few of the most popular ways you can do it. So let's get right into it. Diving right in, the first one, and probably I would say one of the best ones, is called a field study or an observational study. Now, this kind of research, why I say it's the best is that you are really looking at what a user is doing in their natural environment. It's kind of like going on safari and seeing what the animals are doing out in the wild. Being able to observe someone in their actual environment and the context in which they're doing whatever it is they're researching can give you a lot more insight into everything that's going on while they're doing whatever it is. This really helps when you're trying to get an understanding of an existing problem or an existing context that someone may have when they're doing something in particular. So let's think of an example here. If I was going to design an app or a website, something that helps someone order groceries online, it would be awesome to go and observe or do a field study of someone shopping in a grocery store in real life. You'll pick up on things like, where did they start? Do they have a list? Do they know what they're gonna buy? Do they get lost? Do they ask questions? Do they have trouble reaching things on the top shelf? Not that that would matter in a website, but all these things are very contextual. They give a lot of insight into the person's mindset, what they're feeling, what's around them, what may be distracting them, what they're really looking for, and where they have trouble in that experience currently so you can make it better. The next one I want to go over, I'm going to call in-person interviews. So this would be where you bring someone in specifically for an interview to talk about whatever it is. So again, there's a little bit of removal from their real life environment, but in some ways it can kind of be helpful because they're not distracted. They can maybe really think critically about their past experiences. You can ask questions directly, and based on their answers, their tone of voice, their body language, the particular words they use, or maybe if they struggle to answer certain questions, those things can all give you a really good picture of what's going on in that person's world. It's also nice because if they answer something and it's maybe not clear, or you're kind of getting the sense that they took the question differently than you intended, it's really easy to just have a follow-up question. Hey, can you talk more about what you said? Or what about if I phrase the question this way? How would you answer that? Or you mentioned feeling this way when doing that thing. Can you tell me why you felt that way? And you're trying to pull out the information that you need to understand the problem that they're facing and the solution that you are hopefully going to bring to them. If you can't do an in-person interview, I would say the next best step would be a video call, because you can still see their facial expressions and hear their tone of voice, things like that. That can also be a really good way to simulate an in-person interview if you are doing testing remotely. The next one I'm going to talk about is called a diary study, and this is similar to a field study or an in-person interview, except you're not there. It's almost like them interviewing themselves. How this works is you ask a potential user or your user research subject to take note of what's going on when they do a particular task, process, whatever. They would really be writing down everything that they're thinking, they're feeling at a certain time, at a certain moment, at a certain part of whatever process it is, and really keeping that log of information over a period of time so you can look at it later on and start to see trends or other nuances that are particularly interesting. It can be free form, so they can either write what they want, or it can also be really helpful if you provide a specific set of questions for them to answer every time that they do a diary entry. So things like, what time is it? What are you doing? What are you feeling? What are you thinking? On a scale of 1 to 10, how frustrated are you? or what problems came up that you weren't expecting, anything out of the ordinary. Giving those leading questions can kind of help them give you the information that you're really after. This kind of test gives you really good qualitative insight into what's going on in their world and their frame of mind during the task at hand. All right, the next one I want to talk about is card sorting. Card sorting is typically used when you are trying to work on the information architecture of a particular project, but it can be useful in other ways. Card sorting is where you have a bunch of items or products or tasks or any sort of bits that you are working with in your project, and you sort of ask them to categorize them in a way that makes sense and maps to their personal mental model. So how do they think of these things? How would they group certain things together? This can be really helpful if you're designing a very complex product or a website where you may have many items or many pages, and you want to find out how would they go about finding certain things or how they mentally categorize things. It can also be really insightful when they're talking about these different things to sort of hear what labels they're assigning to them. So maybe if you are calling a certain web page one thing, that might not be clear to the user. So they may ask questions, you may explain what that page means, and they may even come up with a new term that makes more sense to them. That kind of insight makes sure that your labels can be clearly understood and they can find exactly what they're looking for where they look for it. And the last user research method I want to talk about today is surveys. Now, surveys can be used in a variety of different ways. You can ask a bunch of different types of questions, multiple choice, fill in the blank, check all that apply, select from a range, rate something from 1 to 10, rate something from good to bad, difficult to easy. You can ask open-ended questions like, tell me about your experience with something, or how do you currently solve the problem that you're having? What would you change about your current solution? And maybe what would you even look for in a new solution? Hint, hint. You can ask them to rank things in order of priority, so maybe from most important to you to least important. What is great about surveys is that they're really easy to send, they're quick and easy for the user to answer usually, and they really give you a lot of quantitative and qualitative data. When you have a lot of surveys going out, you're asking the same questions of people, you're gonna get a lot of feedback, and it's easy to compile all of that and sort of see at a glance where the trends lie. So if you send a survey to 100 people and 90% of them rank something as very important to them, that's a good indicator that that's very important to your user group, right? So getting raw numbers like that can really help inform your design decisions. And I would say surveys are probably the lowest barrier to entry method of user research that I've mentioned today. There's some great tools out there for surveys like SurveyMonkey. I really like Typeform. You can also use a Google form. And if you can't do an in-person interview, or you can't do a diary study, or you need something quick, surveys are a really good, easy way to do that. Now, these are by no means an exhaustive list of all the ways you can research your users, but I would say these are 5 of the most popular used today. There are tons and tons of resources out there for how you can do user research, more in depth on these particular ways, but also giving you all kinds of other ways you can do it. So you have no excuse for not doing your user research. Please do it. It will inform your design so much and will really help you empathize with your users so you know that what you're designing is directly going to impact them in a good way, which is probably the coolest thing about UX, right? You learn from them and you deliver something that's going to help them. That is all I have for this list. I hope you found this helpful. If you like this video, I would appreciate if you gave it a thumbs up. And if you have a favorite method of doing user research or have another way that you'd like to share, please leave a comment down below. It helps everybody see and learn from one another. And that's all for this one. I will see you next time.